There are places in the Trench Crusade where sorrow is not a feeling, it is the air itself. It seeps into the cracks of old bones, hangs heavy in prayers long since choked silent, and settles in the souls of those who still remember what was lost. One such place is the broken carcass of the Second Battle of Acre, where blood turned the mud to rust, and the heavens turned their gaze elsewhere. It was here that something unnatural was born. Not a monster, not a saint, but something in between. A soldier named Ernest, and with him, a fury so pure that it became holy. He was not a commander, not a prophet, just a man who watched every friend, every brother, every last familiar face be swallowed by the Heresiarch Berengair's abyss. The collapse of Acre wasn't just a military failure, it was a spiritual execution. Men prayed as they died, and their gods did not answer. When the bombardment ceased and the smoke bled out into the trenches, Ernest walked through it carrying only a battered rifle and a stare like burnt-out glass. What followed him were not troops. They were revenants, each one broken in a different way, each one carrying the corpse of someone they couldn't save, either on their backs or in their minds. They did not speak of vengeance, they became it. This was not the founding of a regiment, it was the gathering of a blood cult that never wanted to be one. Ernest did not recruit, he buried. For every fallen friend, he carved a name into the inside of his helmet. Soon, others began to do the same. The brigade grew, not through orders, but through suffering. Men who had nothing left to protect began to fight like they had nothing left to lose. Their grief became gravity. It pulled others in. Not just soldiers, but priests who had lost their entire congregations. Medics whose wards had been overrun. Sappers who'd survived the collapse of entire redoubts. Survivors. All of them bleeding somewhere the medici couldn't reach. And so the Red Brigade emerged, not in triumph, but in silence. They did not carry banners. They carried the names of the dead on scraps of parchment, sewn into their cloaks and pressed into their flesh. They took no titles, only a single bitter oath, that they would see the death of Berengair even if it meant their own, especially if it meant their own. But what truly set them apart was this: they never expected to return. Each campaign was their last, each trench assault a funeral procession. They fought as though dying was the only way to keep memory alive. Their existence became a kind of walking martyrdom, a rejection of survival in favor of meaning. And meaning, in the world of Trench Crusade, is a weapon far more dangerous than steel or fire. From the smouldering aftermath of Acre came a scar that would not heal, a brotherhood of the bereaved. A prayer screamed in blood. The Red Brigade was born not in glory, but in grief, and they never forgot it. They were not supposed to survive. Not Acre, not the silence after, not the hollow months that followed where no one dared speak the brigade's name aloud. And yet they did. They kept walking. Not because they believed they could win, but because stopping meant letting grief devour them whole. The Red Brigade does not heal, it endures. Forged not by doctrine or dogma, but by mutual loss, the brigade became a brotherhood of broken parts that still moved as one. They did not form under a central command or official sanction. No decree anointed them. No archcleric blessed their path. Instead, they gathered in the quiet cracks between battles, drawn to one another like sparks flickering in the same cold wind. Survivors of massacres, witnesses to annihilation. Soldiers who had once screamed and now simply nodded, sharing everything without saying a word. They began to call themselves blood pledges, not in ritual, but as truth. Each man swore not to the living, but to the dead. Oaths were spoken over shallow graves, scratched into shell casings, or etched in blood onto trench walls. Their faith wasn't gone. It had been set on fire, and what remained was harder than iron, sharper than shrapnel. When others faltered, they pressed forward. When officers called for retreats, they stayed. They fought without fear, not because they were brave, but because they had already buried everything they had ever loved. The world around them didn't understand. The old church didn't understand. To most of the faithful, war was holy, but it was also a path to salvation. To the brigade, salvation had already failed. The angels had not come. The saints had burned. All that remained was duty to the dead. That made them dangerous, but also invaluable. And so, New Antioch took notice. At first, they were treated as rumors, ghost stories told around trench fires. But when outposts that should have been overrun were found held against impossible odds, when heretic lines were pierced with unnatural precision and brutal efficiency, the Duke began to see the truth. These weren't deserters, they were specialists, and more than that, they were incorruptible. Grief had stripped them of everything hell could tempt. The Duke did not command them. He made an offer: sanctuary, not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. In exchange for their blades, he gave them a place to rest, a city to bleed in peace, a name written not on a tombstone, but on the rolls of war. And for the first time since Acre, the Red Brigade slept under a roof that didn't leak. For the first time, they were not just mourning, they were becoming. Uniforms were never standardized, yet a theme emerged: blood-red cloaks, scorched armor, cloth stitched with the names of the fallen. The skull iconography of New Antioch merged with the brigade's own sigils, symbols that honored those who died, not those who commanded. They didn't march in step. They moved in sync. Like grief itself had found rhythm. Training was unnecessary. Every member of the brigade had already survived worse than most officers could imagine. What they needed wasn't tactics, it was a purpose. And so, they found one in each other. They were not forged in steel, but in sorrow. They were not formed in glory, but in graves. And they were just getting started. New Antioch was never meant to be beautiful. Its spires rose like blades from the bones of ruined cities, its walls stitched from broken statues and armored steel. It was a sanctuary built not for comfort, but for endurance. And for the Red Brigade, it was the first place that did not flinch at their presence. A fortress of grief, where pain could exist without apology. They did not come seeking forgiveness. They came carrying the weight of the dead, and New Antioch gave them ground solid enough to keep carrying it. The Duke did not speak to them as soldiers. He called them brothers, not in blood, but in purpose. He understood what others could not, that the Red Brigade was not an anomaly to be corrected, but a necessity to be accepted. They did not ask for command structures, medals, or compensation. All they wanted was the right to fight and to bury their own. New Antioch made room. A section of the inner district was walled off and given to them. The locals called it the Still Quarter. Not because it was quiet, but because nothing there ever moved without reason. No laughter, no idle chatter, no excess. Just cleaning of weapons, repairing of gear, and rituals of remembrance so private they might as well have been prayers whispered to ghosts. Even the War Hounds seemed quieter there, lying curled against memorial walls carved with names no one else remembered. Within this haven, the brigade created their own rhythm. Every building bore marks of the fallen, smashed helmets mounted above doorways, empty boots nailed to pillars, trench coats folded and displayed like sacred vestments. The brigade kept no statues. They believed memory should rot alongside the flesh. Only the names remained, tattooed into skin, painted in blood across chapel doors. It was here that the infamous Feast of the Dead Men began. No one remembers who held the first one. Only that after a suicidal raid into the Black Trenches, the survivors returned to New Antioch, walked into the Duke's banquet hall uninvited, and sat silently at the table. They did not speak. They did not eat. They simply placed the names of the dead in front of their plates and remained there until dawn. The Duke understood. From that night on, every time a brigade mission was called, the Duke invited them to dine the night before. Plates were served, though few were touched. No toasts, no speeches. Just the names of the dead laid out on the linen, and the Duke seated at the head of the table, helmet off, head bowed. It was a communion of absence, a sacrament of grief. Sanctuary in New Antioch was never peace, but it was recognition. And in a world where most soldiers were used until they broke, the Red Brigade found something rarer than salvation: respect. They did not integrate into the command structure. They operated under their own rights, with their own rituals. But when the orders came, they obeyed, not out of duty, but from bond. A pact forged not on paper, but in fire. The Duke had given them a place to mourn. In return, they became his silent blades. Wherever the war burned hottest, the Red Brigade would walk first, and they would not stop. They were not stationed. They were unleashed. There are ceremonies born from joy, and others born from need. But some are born from void, from the yawning silence that follows when too many names have been erased, too many voices lost beneath the soil. The feast of the dead men was not planned. It was not decreed. It was an instinct, a moment frozen in grief, given form at a long, quiet table beneath the vaulted stone of New Antioch's Hall of War. A place where no words are spoken, and yet everything is said. Before each mission, the Red Brigade assembles, not in barracks, not in drill yards, but at the Duke's own table. There are no orders, no discussion of strategy, only plates of food, untouched, candles burning low, and strips of parchment laid before each setting, bearing names inked in trembling hands. These are not the names of the living. They are the fallen, comrades, family, commanders, enemies once hated and now mourned, ghosts with a seat at the table. The brigade does not eat during these feasts. They sit in full armor, faces half veiled in red cloth, their war hounds curled beneath them like sentinels of grief. The Duke joins them, always. He never speaks either. His presence is not command, but communion. A tacit acknowledgement that in this war, the dead still rule. Each feast is a stillborn vigil. Time does not pass here in minutes or hours. It passes in wait, in silence thick enough to drown in. And when the moment comes, when each soldier has sat long enough in the presence of absence, they rise as one and depart. No toasts, no blessings, just the soft thud of boots, the jingle of dog tags, the low growl of hounds returning to war. What makes the feast terrifying is not its morbidity, it is its clarity. There is no pretense of glory, no illusion of survival. The brigade walks into every battle fully aware it may be their last. The feast is not a farewell, it is a pact, a silent promise that if they die, someone will remember. Not in song or sermon, but at the next table, at the next empty plate. Those outside the brigade whisper of this ritual with awe and unease. Some call it a heresy, an inversion of the church's liturgies, a desecration of proper mourning rites. But the brigade does not care. They do not perform for heaven. Their communion is not for the saints. It is for the blood in the soil, the teeth in the mud, the friends whose screams never stopped echoing in their skulls. Even the heretics have come to fear the feast. They know that when the brigade dines in silence, war will follow, and not the kind of war that can be reasoned with or broken by attrition. The kind of war that walks like a man who has already died and kept going anyway. The kind of war that remembers your name. Some say the Duke's table grows longer with each campaign, that every new blood pledge is given their own seat, even if they've never returned. That in time, it will encircle the entire citadel like a serpent of stone and memory. But there is no official record, only empty chairs, and names no one else speaks. They move ahead of the column, shadows on four legs, silent as falling ash. The War Hounds of the Red Brigade are not animals in the traditional sense. They are relics of rage, bred not for loyalty, but for pain, and pain alone. Each one born from a lineage soaked in fire, trained not with kindness but with scars. And yet, despite their monstrous lineage, despite their reputation for bloodlust, these beasts are not unthinking tools. They are mourners, just like their masters. Every hound is paired with a blood pledge through ritual, not training. The process is not explained, only endured. A man enters the pit. The beast is waiting. Sometimes there is violence, sometimes only stillness. But when the ritual ends, a bond has been made. One forged through grief, not dominance. These hounds do not obey commands. They recognize pain, and they follow it. Their names are not shouted. They are whispered. Many wear the tags of the dead, previous handlers lost in the field, comrades whose memories still burn behind the hound's feral eyes. To outsiders, this is unnerving. To the brigade, it is sacred. The hound is a vessel. It remembers the fallen not as myth, but as scent, blood, and breath. It carries grief like armor. It bites with memory. In battle, the War Hounds are more than weapons. They are omens. When a brigade unit deploys, the hounds are the first to move, slipping through barbed wire, crawling through crater-pocked ruins, appearing in the trenches like red-eyed phantoms. Their presence is a herald of violence, and for heretics, it is already too late. The War Hounds fight not for food or praise. They fight because they have nothing else. No homeland, no rest. They do not retreat, even when mortally wounded. There are stories, spoken only in hushed, reverent tones, of hounds returning from missions alone, tongues hanging, bodies ruined, dragging back the remains of their fallen handlers. They do not leave them behind. Not ever. Some in New Antioch have tried to study the War Hounds, anatomy, training, even breeding. None succeeded. The beasts do not breed in captivity. They do not submit to dissection. One priest who attempted to exorcise a war hound disappeared within the hour. His robes were later found draped over the kennel, untouched by teeth, but soaked in blood. No one tried again. To the brigade, these creatures are not pets. They are not assets. They are not mascots. They are brothers. And when one falls, the rites are observed with the same precision and silence as any fallen soldier. The corpse is wrapped in red cloth, marked with its handler's name, and carried to the still quarter. It is buried with a piece of its master's armor. Sometimes, if the master is still alive, he will place his own helmet in the grave. He will fight bareheaded from that moment on, as if daring death to take him next. No other unit in the faithful treats its beast this way. No other unit understands. Because no other unit was built from sorrow. The War Hounds of the Red Brigade are not symbols. They are not tools. They are the echo of Acre, the howl left ringing through the trenches long after the last screams have died. And when they charge into battle, blood-matted and crimson-cloaked, they do not bark, they remember. And that is what makes them truly terrifying. You can see it in their eyes before they speak, if they speak at all. A depth that doesn't shimmer, doesn't flicker, doesn't blink. It just stares. As though they've seen something so raw, so ruinous, that language itself recoils from it. These are the ones who arrive not through recruitment, but through gravity. Drawn to the Red Brigade like ash to flame. They are known as the Crimson Communicants, the silent pilgrims of grief. And none of them are whole. They come from every corner of the war-torn faithful. Disillusioned confessors, broken canonesses, penitent snipers who've watched too many comrades fall through their scopes. Their uniforms are mismatched, their armor battered, their insignias scrubbed clean. Some have no tongues. Others wear veils soaked in the blood of those they could not save. All carry the weight of something they cannot put down. No one invites them. They are never welcomed, but they are never turned away. The Red Brigade does not ask where they come from, only that they carry names. Every communicant arrives with a list, handwritten, engraved, sometimes carved into their own skin, of the dead they failed. For some, it is a single name. For others, it fills scrolls. They do not seek redemption. They know better. What they seek is use. A chance to be weaponized, to become the scream they can no longer voice. Some of them never speak again. Others recite the names of the fallen like mantras mid-charge, gunfire punctuated by broken syllables. A few weep when they kill. Not from regret, but from relief. That the noise, even for a moment, drowns out the silence that follows memory. There are whispered tales of a cloister deep in the still quarter, a room where the walls are covered in blood-written scripture, where no light burns and no voice rises above a whisper. It is said the communicants gather there, not to pray, but to remember, together and in pain. Some kneel until their legs go numb. Others stand facing the wall for hours, hands pressed flat against the stone like they're waiting for something to reach back. No one knows how many of them exist. They do not march together. They do not wear the same colors. But when the brigade moves, they are there, in the fog, in the alleys, in the ruins of shattered outposts, always just at the edge of visibility. Their presence is unmistakable, like the cold breath before the plunge, like the whisper before the scream. To the faithful at large, they are unsettling, abnormal, perhaps even heretical. After all, the Church teaches that grief must be transmuted into strength, that the soul must be cleansed of despair. But the brigade rejects that alchemy. Despair is not an obstacle to them. It is a resource. Because only someone truly broken knows what it means to fight without hope. The Crimson Communicants are not leaders. They do not rally others. But in the chaos of war, when formations collapse and orders dissolve into screams, they are often the last ones standing. Not because they believe they will win, but because they do not care if they fall. They have already buried everything that made them human. What's left is purpose. And purpose cannot die. There is no final victory in Trench Crusade. No grand moment when the trumpet sounds and the war ends. No banner raised above the blood-stained cathedrals to mark salvation. The war simply continues, grinding, churning, devouring. And so too does the Red Brigade. Because for them, death was never the end. It was the beginning. And it comes again and again, with a ritual precision that defies even the most faithful liturgies. They are not replenished, they are reborn. Each time a blood pledge falls, the brigade does not recruit to replace them. They wait. And always, inevitably, someone comes. Drawn by grief, marked by loss, a new face at the Duke's table, a new name etched into red cloth, a new soul folded into the memory engine that drives this broken order forward. This is the cycle of sacrifice. It begins with the silence, someone wandering the still quarter, leaving offerings at the graves of men they never met. Then comes the vigil, days without speech, eyes fixed on the chapel of names. And finally, the ritual, a single strip of red fabric, offered without ceremony. No questions, no demands, just the quiet acknowledgement that they are ready to die for the ones already gone. And when they return from their first battle, if they return, they are no longer a man or woman. They are red. This cycle has continued for years, perhaps centuries. No official records are kept. No formal rosters exist. The Red Brigade is not a unit to be tracked. It is a wound that never closes. And within that wound, something immortal festers. Commanders from other divisions have tried to study them, to formalize the brigade, to chain it to structure, hierarchy, tradition. Every attempt has failed. The brigade resists formal authority, not with rebellion, but with absence. They simply disappear, vanish into the trench fog, re-emerge somewhere else where they're needed, already fighting, already bleeding. They do not need orders. Their war has no end because their purpose has no conclusion. Their lives are not arcs, they are offerings, and they give themselves again and again, not for glory, not for victory, but for memory. To ensure that the dead are not abandoned, that grief is not discarded, that sorrow too can be weaponized. Even the Duke understands this now. He no longer asks how many return, he only sets the table. One plate for each fallen, one candle for each new name. The feast continues, the graves multiply. And in the streets of New Antioch, red-cloaked silhouettes march out into the fog, silent and steady, the War Hounds padding at their side. This is the truth of the Red Brigade. They are not a unit. They are not a cult. They are not even a brotherhood. They are the persistence of grief in a world that no longer has time to mourn. And so long as the war continues, so long as saints burn and trenches fill and angels scream without descending, they will walk, one step behind the front, one heartbeat behind death, with names in their mouths and silence in their souls. They will never stop, because the dead do not rest. And neither do they. If this descent has carved a hollow space in your chest, If something ancient and cold stirred as the brigade marched past, then stay with us. Subscribe. Join the memory. Because this story doesn't end. It echoes.